Eric Sprott, Rick Rule, Doug Casey, Maren Katusa, and Keith Neumeyer. All shareholders of one new gold stock, making big headlines since its start last April, acquiring gold for $5 to $10 per ounce in the ground, which is dramatically lower than the $50 to $100 per ounce in the ground other companies have been paying. To learn more about what hard asset investors are calling a mineral bank, visit futuremoneytrends.com/investright. Greetings and thank you for joining us at futuremoneytrends.com. I have a special guest with us today, Jayant Bhandari. You can find him at jayantbhandari.com. He's an institutional advisor. He's worked with Casey Research, U.S. Global Investors, and now he literally travels nonstop looking for opportunities. He also tries to spread the absurd idea of individual liberty, free markets, and becoming a sovereign thinker as he makes his way across the globe. Jayant, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me here, Daniel.
Well, hey, I've gotten to watch a lot of your YouTube videos over the past, I would say 7 or 8 months ago when I first was introduced to you by a mutual friend. And I really enjoyed all your philosophy talks, so I definitely want to get into some of that. But right now, without a doubt, on everyone's mind is what is going on in 2016. You talked to some of the wealthiest people in the world, and you also, as we were just talking, I mean, you're out there not just visiting a third world country for a day or two, or going or staying at the Marriott and only eating where the tourist spots are. You're actually out there really seeing the world like no one else. So what are your thoughts, Jayant, about 2016 and the markets? Is this the great unraveling now, or is this just a short-term blimp?
I think there is indeed a great unraveling happening right now. Daniel, I travel about 8 to 10 months a year, and I have been to Congo, Australia, Bolivia, Peru, Canada, US in the last 3 months. And I spend a fair amount of time everywhere I go. My view is that the economies around the world are stagnating. And they are stagnating because the sizes of governments have increased linearly. These guys are expropriating more and more of our money. They are enforcing regulations that are completely stupid, which is basically suffocating the entrepreneurial spirit of the society. And the result is that despite the fact that human society should continue to increase in economic and intellectual value, it is now stagnating around the world for one reason and one reason only, and that is that the governments are expropriating huge amount of money, and they are suffocating us literally today.
When you look at such a bearish view, that with the debt and all the money printing and how so many things are unsustainable because of government regulation and government tax and government incentives, I know you're out there looking for opportunities, and you are a value investor. So on the bright side, where are some of the big opportunities you see for investors today?
Of course, in any market, there's a bull market happening in any economy. And in my view, one of the best places to keep your money, and I'll talk about a few of those here. One of the better ones is gold. The reason gold becomes an extremely important commodity in this kind of environment is that people tend to gravitate towards gold when there is political uncertainty. And political uncertainty is now across the world a major problem. We might not feel it that way, but that is what I see everywhere in the world. Also, the economies are stagnating, and when economies stagnate, people tend to gravitate towards gold. I also like some of the markets like China and Hong Kong and Singapore. These countries are, and I know even some of the people who have same philosophical beliefs that I have don't like China anymore, but I think China is one of the best countries today in the world. So is Hong Kong, so is Singapore. Pay attention to these countries. pay attention to some of the dividend paying companies in these countries. And I think you might benefit from investing in these countries just because these guys are operating their governance in a more rational way than countries outside in the rest of the world, actually.
Now, Jayant, what about when you're looking at China? Not only do they have a demographics issue with an aging population, but they also have, these. You hear about these millions of units that are vacant from, entire ghost cities. Isn't that exactly like to the most extreme thing that you would say when it comes to government malinvestment and governments kind of messing up economies?
Well, okay, so when I talk nicely about China, I'm not saying that in absolute sense. The governments are bad anyway. So it's just that it's better than what I see elsewhere. Daniel, when I go out at 9 o'clock in the evening, 9 o'clock at night in San Francisco or in Vancouver, and I see 30% of apartments with no electricity, it tells me that those apartments are empty. Now, yes, China has a lot of empty apartments and empty cities, but when I go back to the same places after 2 or 3 years, they tend to have more people occupying more apartments. Now, you also have to understand that China has been growing at the rate of about 5 to 15% over the last 20 to 30 years now. And there is a concept called overheating in economics. And traditionally, economists would have expected overheating to start happening in about 3 or 4 or 5 years' time maximum. Now, China has been growing at this huge growth rate for the last 20 to 30 years. So if you see some empty apartments, this is only a small problem for China. And yes, indeed, this might have resulted into some overheating already, and it might slow down for the next few years. But that does not really matter. It's growing from a very high economic rate. And so 6.5%, I mean, do you really call it slowing? A 6.5% growth rate is a fabulous growth rate.
Now, for gold and silver stocks, do you see the gold and silver stocks being able to come out of this bear market because of gold and silver as opposed to the other mining shares like in the base metals or even getting into the energy sector like oil because of the overall slowdown? Do you see it kind of a decoupling here?
Well, Daniel, in my view, about 60 to 80% of mining stocks and gold and silver junior mining companies are useless companies. They have no projects and they have no managements. A lot of these companies are run by lifestyle people. So there is virtually no correlation between a lot of gold mining stocks and gold, because these gold mining stocks have no gold in them. So in my view, what is actually happening right now is that the index will continue to fall because these 60 to 80% companies that are garbage companies must cease to exist. However, companies that are run by good managements and companies that have good projects are already performing. They are already going up in share price. The index, of course, does not capture that, but if you follow good companies, you will see performance going forward. But also remember, gold hasn't actually performed as much as it should. Gold has, of course, performed in virtually every currency except the US dollar, but market, because of its general pessimism, hasn't really started buying gold. But I think market will eventually pay attention to gold, and that will have a very good effect on gold mining and gold junior mining companies, particularly companies that are undervalued, run by good managements, and companies that have good projects.
Last time we did an interview with you, you were a director of Gold Canyon Resources. Since that time, it's been acquired by First Mining Finance. That's a stock my newsletter covers. I know you've spoken positively about it. Are you still a shareholder? Are you happy with the overall transaction of FF taking out GCU?
Absolutely. I think that was, I feel so good about what we did. Gold Canyon management did, Akiko Levinson, who was the CEO of Gold Canyon, did exactly what she thought was the right thing for the shareholders of Gold Canyon. And the result has been that Gold Canyon shareholders have made about 300% of their money based on what the share price was about 3 or 4 months back. There is always a time, Daniel, when these are venture stocks and these companies and these projects should just move on to the management that can carry on these projects a step further. And First Mining Finance, we realized, was run by a mining group, people who are very good at raising money from the market and people who have historically developed projects, billions of dollars worth of companies in the past, and they were truly the right people for Gold Canyon shareholders to move their project towards. And I think that has been a fabulous move for Gold Canyon shareholders. And First Mining, of course, I got my First Mining shares as a result of it, and it continues to be one of my biggest holdings.
That's great. When you're looking at these deals and acquisitions, do you see a lot more of these happenings? Is this going to be like a 2016, 2017 trend where there's definitely some consolidation between the juniors, companies like a First Mining or other type of companies like that, even bigger companies starting to take out some of these other juniors?
This has been happening for the last 2 years now, Daniel, and I think this will continue going forward. And this offers arbitrage opportunities for investors to make money from, while also investing in good companies. So yes, indeed, this will continue, and this has been a focus for me for the last couple of years. And I think this is indeed one of the best ways to make money and also to get invested in very good companies at a cheaper price than what the market offers to you by investing in by the acquiring company itself.
Jayant, as I stated earlier in the interview, you do a lot of traveling, and I had a question for you on the mainstream U.S. financial press. What is the biggest misconception the U.S. media has about the state of the global economy? And then, if you can, also, when you go to investment conferences surrounded by other liberty lovers, other resource investors, what is their biggest misconception and that you have collected from traveling to all these countries?
So, Daniel, I did an MBA from one of the better business schools in the world. And I feel very shy and very humiliated talking about it, actually, because a lot of these MBAs are people who go from Ivy League colleges to MBAs, and then they think they understand the economies, they understand cultures, and they understand the principles of universe. The reality is that your spreadsheet does not really tell you much about what the future of the world will be like. It's extremely, extremely hard to predict the future. Now, the problem is that a lot of this financial press, World Bank, IMF, are populated by people who have zero real-life experiences. They have no understanding about complexity and volatility of real life. And these people sit back and they think all we have to do is to set up infrastructure or remove corruption, and somehow the world will start growing. Unfortunately, world does not grow that way. And these people, because of the policies they have dictated on the developed world and on the developing world, they have resulted into an institutional environment which is very, very oppressive for everyone across the world. But moreover, the worst kind of people have risen to the top. And I think that is not really a good recipe for continual economic and intellectual growth of the society.
That's Very interesting, because I mean, when you look at some of the people in power, or even some of the investors everybody spotlights, some of those people are the people who, you read on Zero Hedge. These are the biggest manipulators of the markets. When you go to a natural resource conference and you hear everybody focused either on inflation or a dollar collapse, do you think they're on the right track? Is that feasible? When you visit China and India and Europe, and you see how everybody else views the U.S. currency and the U.S. dollar, is the dollar at risk?
Well, not necessarily, Daniel, and for the completely wrong reasons. American government has been printing money like crazy, but the problem is that because the U.S. has become mostly a cashless society, the people who run the U.S. government basically control everything that you have. So most of your and my net worth is in the banking system, and tomorrow morning they can just freeze our accounts. So they can steal money from us and at the same time not let dollar collapse. But also, while Americans are printing so much money, the reality is that every country, look at India, look at Africa, Latin America, Middle East, these people are getting degraded politically and economically much faster than the US is. So that is providing additional support to the US dollar. So for very Orwellian reasons, American dollar should actually in a real world collapse, but it might not collapse in the near future.
What about another competing currency? Is there any currency out there like a Bitcoin or even the Chinese renminbi, the euro? Is there any alternative currency realistically over the next 5 to 10 years for the U.S. dollar?
Well, absolutely. I love Chinese renminbi. And I know people talk about devaluation that's been happening with the Chinese currency. But listen, virtually every currency in the world has got devalued faster than renminbi in the last 1 or 2 years. And not only renminbi is mostly connected with the US dollar at the head, it also offers you a higher interest rate compared to the US dollar. So in keeping some of your money in China and in renminbi is a great thing to do, apart from giving you a necessary international diversification.
You talked earlier about the world just suffering from so much government. And I know in the U.S. there's definitely a liberty movement. There is, and it could be just because of the internet. It could be because of what we went through with Bush and now Obama. But there's definitely something happening in this country where, people from all sides want more individual liberty, and they want government out of their life, and they don't trust the government. The poll numbers for the mistrust of government is higher than ever here in the U.S. Are we seeing that around the world, or is this something we're seeing right now in the U.S. because of some of the things I mentioned? Or is the communications revolution kind of opening the eyes across the globe of individual liberty?
Well, I don't think communication revolution has necessarily changed humanity. People are as less informed as they were before the communication revolution happened. I think we can pretty much choose what we want to see and what we want to listen to. Unfortunately, I think people might be becoming less informed as time goes by. And I also think people might be becoming more statist as time goes by. And this is because of public education and the kind of institutions that run us. Now, what you say that liberty movement is more visible in the US, my view is that perhaps it's because people like you and me keep closer eyes on the liberty movement. So we might think that this size is growing. But in my view, at an overall level, people are becoming more statist, they are becoming more dependent and less interested in liberty. They just want their evening beer and good food and the weekends and vacations.
For the U.S. election, what are your thoughts on it? You get the Democrats basically prepared to push a socialist, Bernie Sanders, even though right now Clinton is the hand-picked candidate. Bernie Sanders is where all the excitement is. And on the Republican side, you have a nationalist, someone who might have some great business ideas, but he has been very vocal about attacking minority groups.
So let's talk about attacking minority groups. Daniel, I think some of the things are some things we should all listen to. Political correctness is destroying the West. It's destroying the intellectual and spiritual background of the Western civilization. And in my view, Western civilization has been the only civilization in humanity. And it is very important to understand that the West does not import too much of lack of civilization from outside the West. So not that I'm a fan of Donald Trump. I think he will be disastrous for America. But it seems to me that virtually everyone will be worse for America than him. But at the same time, I would love to see Ron Paul to come and run the country, but that isn't going to happen. In my view, basically, as my former boss, Doug Casey, keeps saying, every time you think that the current president is the worst president ever, all you have to do is to wait for the next election. So American politics will continue to deteriorate, and that is the problem with democracy. And most people don't understand this thing. Democracy is truly the worst form of government, because the people who decide who runs your government are exactly the people who are least capable of understanding economics and public policy, and these are the masses. Masses should not have the right to vote.
I don't know if I could put it that way, but I totally agree that it is scary every time they do these man on the street videos and ask people questions, and then you're like, these are the people that vote, that decide how my wallet, what portion of my wallet is going to go towards the government. Jayant Bhandari of jayantbhandari.com, if you would like to subscribe to his newsletter. He does not spam you. You get very good thoughts, I would say every 1 to 2 weeks, from his travels, different opportunities he sees. And right now is a great time because this guy's traveling all over the world, talking to all the smartest people in the room when he goes to these conferences and when he travels and sees site tours for companies. He's seeing other big investors. And 2016 is a year of crisis, but it's also a year of great, great opportunity. So make sure you go to his website and subscribe. Jayant, thank you so much again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Daniel. Appreciate that.